distinctions, according to Laozi, right? The Tao doesn't make those kinds of distinctions. It accepts everything as natural. I mean, even, say, the difference between male and female. And you may be saying, wait a minute, that's a natural distinction, right? But gender is more than anatomy. I mean, perhaps some of you men out there have a feminine side, and vice versa as well. I'm reminded of a cartoon from the New Yorker that plays with the idea of up and down in a Taoist sense. So in this cartoon, there's an elevator operator who's standing in front of an elevator, and up above the elevator, there's a circle with a sort of S in the middle of this symbol of yin and yang. And the caption says, actually, I'm going up and I'm going down. Now, I know that elevators go up and down all the time, but can an elevator go up and down at the same time? And I think the answer is yes. If you were in space, looking, say, on the moon, looking at the Earth through a telescope, and there was an elevator that was right at the South Pole, when that elevator went up with respect to the Earth, it would actually be going down with respect to the moon. Okay, Laozi would love those kinds of contradictions and puzzles. The idea that the universe consists of opposites in harmony can be seen in this notion of yin and yang. Okay, sometimes Americans say yin and yang. Yin and yang sounds a little more Chinese. So there are these two elements. Yin is dark and passive and female and persevering, and yang is light and active, male, initiating. But they can't be reduced to good and bad. It's not like yang is good and yin is bad, or vice versa. It's more like the opposition between heaven and earth, right? So that both elements are necessary, and everything has some share of both of them. So yin and yang ebb and flow over time, kind of like a pendulum, right? So in the summer, it gets too hot, too much yang, and then it'll swing back the other way to yin of winter, and then it'll swing back the other way. The movement of the Tao, according to the Tao Te Ching, is reversal. So think about all of the artificial human distinctions that we make, right? Gold is valuable, dirt is worthless. But from the perspective of the Tao, those are both natural occurring elements. Well, dirt's not an element, but substances. Even though, from the perspective of people kill each other over the former of gold, and they don't really care so much about the other. Though once again, if you're trying to grow crops, dirt is going to be much more valuable than gold, which is hard to plant seeds in. There's something of a contradiction a little bit here with Laozi, because he says that these distinctions don't matter, like weak or strong, but he actually likes the weak. So Laozi is going to lean toward the unlikely term. In the distinction between solid and empty, he likes empty. He says that it's the doors and the windows that make a room useful, or it's the space in between spokes that make a wheel, or it's the space within a jug that gives it its utility. When he thinks about weak or strong, traditionally, I mean, everybody would say, oh, I like strong better. But Laozi's going to say, maybe you should give weak a second look. He says, when alive, human beings are supple and weak. When dead, they're stiff and strong. And then he uses lots of images. He talks about the uncarved block. What shape is that? And it's hard to know before it starts to be cut up. He likes water, which takes the low position. It's submissive. But, he says, nothing under heaven is softer or more yielding than water, but when it attacks things hard and resistant, there's not one of them that can prevail. So water's very soft, and it takes the shape of whatever container you can put your hand right through it, but for wearing down mountains over time, or carving valleys, there's nothing like water. Laozi gives particular attention to women, but he doesn't advocate for equality between the sexes. Rather, the Tao Te Ching celebrates stereotypical female qualities, virtues such as yielding and softness and humility, and it suggests that men would be better off if they adopted those attitudes. Laozi says, know the masculine, but keep to the feminine. Harmony comes from following the Tao, from rejecting man-made distinctions and from hierarchy. So in this case, it's the opposite of Confucianism, which says if everybody knew their place in society and acted in accordance with it, things would work smoothly. Laozi says, just forget all of those social distinctions. They don't matter. Another quote, "In the pursuit of learning, according to Laozi, one knows more every day. In the pursuit of the way, one does less every day. One does less and less until one does nothing at all. And when one does nothing at all, there's nothing that is undone. It's always through not meddling that the empire is won. Should you meddle, then you're not equal to the task of winning the empire." Notice that political application at the end. Remember, early Chinese philosophy is often played out before rulers as people are trying to get jobs and give political advice. So in this quote, there's an idea of wei, of non-action, non-intervention, sometimes translated as effortless action. It's not exactly doing nothing, but it's avoiding whatever doesn't come naturally. Don't do things that you have to work too hard at. Do things that are effortless. Laozi is going to give you two cautions here about ordinary ways of doing things. He says, when you emphasize a virtue, you highlight a vice. Or the quotation is, remember from what I read you before, "When all under heaven know beauty is beauty, already there is ugliness." Okay, what could that mean? I want you to think of someone who's beautiful. I'll just throw a name. How about Scarlett Johansson? And for those of you who are female, let's say Denzel Washington. When I say that Scarlett Johansson is a beautiful woman, I am also secretly implying that women who don't look like Scarlett are not quite so beautiful, right? You can't define something without showing the other side of it. It's like two sides of a coin. So highlighting a virtue also emphasizes a vice or a deficit. The second caution is the law of unintended consequences, that assertive actions bring their opposites in a sort of a backlash. So if you're pushing too hard at work for a pet project, that can make your colleagues more resistant to it. Or politicians whose ads feature their families a little too prominently make people suspicious about infidelity. Why does he have to go that far? It's like, I think he protests a little bit too much. Both of these ideas, right, this backlash and virtues and vices being inseparable, both of them undercut the Confucian ideas of morality and government activism. Another quote from later on, "When the great Tao declined, the doctrines of humanity and righteousness arose," as run and eat, which are key Confucian principles. "When knowledge and wisdom appeared, there emerged great hypocrisy. When the 6 family relationships are not in harmony, there will be the advocacy of filial piety and deep love to children. When a country is in disorder, there will be praise of loyal ministers." In other words, you wouldn't be talking about filial piety if people were already respecting their parents. I mean, the fact that you're talking about it means there's a problem. Loyal ministers are only praised when disloyalty is common. So Laozi says if you get rid of sageliness and wisdom, benevolence and righteousness, all of those Confucian virtues, the people would be benefited 100-fold. Laozi is going to look back to the era before the Zhou dynasty, to the legendary Yellow Emperor. And he thought of that as a time of when there were small kingdoms and people were content with simple things and few possessions. Toward the end of the Tao Te Ching, he gives his own vision of what an ideal society would be like. He says, even though neighboring states are within sight of each other, even though they can hear the sounds of each other's dogs and chickens, so they're pretty close, their people will grow old and die without ever having visited one another. They're just, that's the end of the quote, but they're just perfectly content with what they have. Okay, let's try some applications here. Based on his understanding of a unified, harmonious cosmos where opposites work together, like yin and yang, Laozi offers several pieces of practical advice to both rulers and individuals. He says, union with nature, right, if you take the perspective of the Tao, that will bring freedom and serenity and longevity. Simplicity and humility are preferable to power and ambition. So you should cut down on your wants. Don't try to be number one. If you try to be number one, number two and number three will all try to gang up and bring you down. He says, how about, he doesn't say, but my paraphrase is, what about being number 9? I mean, nobody will really care about you then. Let the big guys fight it out. Remember, this is a time of a lot of warfare, and you will sit on the sidelines and last a lot longer. Don't work too hard. Quit while you're ahead. Take it easy. Go with the flow. Okay. I grew up in California. This all sounds very familiar to me. You may ask, doesn't talking of simplicity and tranquility, doesn't that all bring its opposite? Remember this sort of backlash thing? If you push too hard, the opposite will come. And the answer is yes. But that's part of his point. The Tao is silent. There aren't any arguments. There's no confrontation. Remember, the way that can be spoken of is not the real way. The best teaching uses no words. Because language is one of the main ways that humans divide nature into this and that and make distinction and assign value to it. The Tao just encompasses everything non-judgmentally. Since forceful action always brings a backlash, it's best to practice non-action, right? Because civilization is the source of so many problems, government should be as minimal and unobtrusive as possible. Laozi says the worst rulers are despised by their people. Somewhat better are those who are feared by their people. Better yet are rulers who are loved. Okay, and in the West, we might stop there, but Laozi goes further. And the best of all are those rulers who are hardly even noticed.